Hello and welcome to another episode of Work 2.0, the podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Wells, and this is where we talk about AI, power, and the future of work. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Daniel Chait, and he is the CEO of Greenhouse. Now, as a career coach, my background as a career coach, working within workforce development and helping people to upgrade their resumes, one of the biggest questions that my clients come to me with is, how do I ensure my resume aligns with ATS, right? Is compatible for ATS. And so for the first time ever, for this Work 2.0 podcast exclusive, I'm sitting across from the executive of one of the world's most popular ATS systems. So I'm going to be asking him the questions which I'm sure you're going to want to know. And this is definitely a must listen. So stay tuned in, buckle up, and we're going to have a really exciting conversation. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. And I want to apologize in advance to job seekers having to know what an ATS is, but we're going to work through it here today, and hopefully we can help shed some light on the process for folks.
Amazing, amazing. Now, I want to get into, I think we should kick off with what is ATS for job seekers who don't know what it is, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, it's not really, designed for them typically or traditionally. The ATS acronym means applicant tracking system. That's a piece of software that companies have traditionally used, not surprisingly, to track the applicants that they have when they open up a job. But why does it matter to job seekers? Because increasingly the role of that ATS has evolved and migrated as technology has become more powerful from simply a sort of filing cabinet of where those resumes get put into a system that really runs the many aspects of the entire hiring process from within an organization, including things like helping the organization to sift through their inbox when they get a deluge of resumes and try to figure out how to prioritize that inbox and where to start. And that's where sometimes job seekers intersect with this question, because it's like, well, if I'm going to be sorting my inbox according to some criteria to look at the applicants in a priority order, job seekers want to know, how do I get to be front of the line?
Naturally, right? And that's the question that people keep asking me as well. So I think we'll hopefully clear some of that up today. I wrote an article in Forbes recently about the collapse of trust in hiring because of AI. It's kind of like double standards that a lot of job seekers are facing, where there's this paradox of AI being used to create AI slop resumes,
Yes.
Which are flooding ATS, those systems. And hiring managers are seeing that, and they're combating AI with AI. So there's a lack of trust on both sides. In your view, Daniel, who's to blame for that lack of trust, that breakdown in trust when it comes to hiring? Where would this all start?
Yeah, it's less about blame, but I think it is important to understand what's happening, and so we can figure out how to address it. And I think so. Let's kind of break it apart, like what's actually going on and why is there this lack of trust and what can be done about it. I think where that's come from is, well, first of all, if you look at the trends over the last several years, application volumes are way up. So across our customer base, there's a 412% increase in the number of applications.
Wow.
That every recruiter is looking at, as compared to just a few years ago, right? And those recruiting teams, by the way, are not any bigger. They're about half the size that they used to be, because companies are under a ton of pressure to be more efficient and do more with less. And so you've got this situation where the companies are facing, an increasing volume of job applications, number one. Number two, job seekers are realizing, like, well, it's easier and easier to apply to more jobs with automation, and there's even tools now that they can purchase that will auto apply on their behalf with AI to thousands of jobs. And so it feels like, well, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not hearing back from anyone. I may as well send out more job applications, because what else am I going to do? And then the third thing that happens is, especially with AI, there's all these new ways to try to craft your job application to give you an advantage, with a range, let's say, of implications. Sometimes as simple and sort of straightforward as, hey, I want to make sure that this resume I'm submitting as a job seeker is as matches what's on the job ad as closely as possible, so that it looks like a high priority application, all the way to some of the real nefarious stuff, like hackers and criminals trying to masquerade as someone else to infiltrate an organization by getting hired there so that they can steal their secrets. And so that's happening in the context of job application volumes going way up. And so all these kind of like problems are creeping in. And then what the companies are doing in response to that is they've started to use AI to just try to filter all that out in sort of very basic ways. If you just imagine, and you see this sometimes like on social media, someone says, oh, I got 1,000 resumes for a job I opened. I didn't know what to do. I sent them all to Claude and I told it to find the 10 I should talk to. And Claude sent me 10. And you're like, how did it decide those? Was that fair? Was that, defensible or transparent in any way? And of course it wasn't. It just makes it harder for people to make it through the process. And so as a result, the applicants send in more applications because the filter just made it harder to get seen. And when the more application volume goes up, the filters get stiffer, and round we go. And so that's a situation that we've coined the AI doom loop. And it's basically each side is using AI to try to solve a real problem that they have, but in ways that are making the overall system worse, not better. And so that's the situation. When you ask who to blame, like, it's unfortunate for everyone. I'll say this, and you do sometimes hear a lot of finger pointing as a job seeker. They're rightly frustrated. They're not getting anywhere. It doesn't feel like the system is working for them. And as an employer, similarly, they open up a role and they're faced with this deluge of applicants who may not even know they've applied to this job. They may not be at all relevant, and they might be a criminal. And so, yeah, they're both facing these problems that neither of them is really causing, but is definitely causing a lot of problems for both sides.
Wow. So far from, we talk a lot about the hype of, with the AI boom, AI increases productivity, there's a lot of positives. But on the other side, it can also cause a lot of overwhelm for the employer as well as overwhelm for candidates, right? By giving extra work or sloppy work, resulting in more steps and slowing down hiring processes. You also argue that resumes, degrees, and cover letters are dying because the AI era of work has made them unreliable workplace signals. So, what matters instead?
Yeah, so we talked about a doom loop and all the problems, and so but this whole podcast doesn't have to be so depressing. Like that's the bad news. But when you start to think about, well, what can we do about all of that, I would start by saying, the problem isn't AI. The problem is bad AI solutions to the problem that people are using. And so I think from that lens, the positive story or the way forward here, I think, is actually, I'm a big optimist that AI, if designed properly, and if you think about all the people involved, the job seekers, the employers, the system as a whole, if you think about that, I think there's real opportunities for AI to make things radically better, much more fair, much more opportunity to express who you are as a job seeker, and to make the process feel better and be more efficient. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to make things better. And so you asked about resumes and cover letters and these things. Like, I think that's a great place to start because, I mean, let's face it, resumes have never been great. I mean, even if you go back, decades, you had to sort of take everything you've ever done and all you're capable of doing and distill it down to like a 1 or maybe 2-page listing of bullet points. So already you're compressing out a lot of what makes you you. And secondly, is resumes almost by design are focused on what I call credentialism, right? Is like, here's what, if you just like close your eyes and picture a typical resume, what are the things that stand out the most? First of all, your name is the biggest thing on the top of the resume in bold. And then the next things that are all listed out in bold are like the job titles you've had and the companies you've worked at. And those are all credentials. And I think, the modern sort of take on how do you make sure that the right people get the best shot at, a fair shot at getting hired, is to move past credentialism and think about skills-based hiring. Think about not what what do they, where have they worked, or what do they have, accolades that they can claim, but who is this person? What are they good at, and how did that line up to what we need as a company? I'll give you one stat, which I think should illustrate this point really dramatically. And this is from a study that was done in 2003. So this is not new news. But the study looked at racial discrimination in resume review. It asked the question, when I send in a resume, does the fact that you can sort of infer from what's on that resume some information about my racial background, does that affect my chances of getting an interview? The study proved pretty definitively it does. So what they did was they sent out thousands of resumes that were identical, except the name at the top had a stereotypically African American sounding or a stereotypically white American sounding name. And what they found was a 50 percentage point disparity. The person had a stereotypically black name. They were 50% less likely to get invited for an interview with the same exact resume. So these practices, this is not about AI, right? This was 2003. So resume review has been problematic forever. What can we do about it in the era of AI? I would say imagine a world where we didn't have to do resume review at all, where we just skip that. Now, why can't we do that historically? Well, resumes are reviewed because the next step is an interview, and interviews have been expensive to deliver, right? If I'm going to take an employee of mine and have them spend time with a candidate on the phone, that's going to cost a lot of money. I only have so many interviews, interviewers, and it's expensive to schedule them, and it takes a lot of time. And so companies have had to gatekeep that step and say, well, I don't care how many applicants the company gets. They're only going to interview 20 people. Well, now we can deliver great first interview screens automatically with AI that feel comfortable and natural, that are transparent, that are fair, that are use structured hiring principles. And companies can now deliver those to anyone, anytime, day or night, really inexpensively at scale. And so companies are now saying, well, we're going to stop gatekeeping that and everybody gets a shot. We don't really care what's on your resume. If you pass the interview, we want to talk to you. And that's really opening up opportunities for people that otherwise weren't qualifying for them for a variety of reasons. It could be bias. It could just be, there's a long line and it's hard to stand out. And so I think that example points the way towards how AI can be used to rethink hiring, overturn some of the old assumptions, and give people much better and fairer ways to find and get a job.
You said so much there, which I really want to zoom in on a bit more. First thing that I want to focus on is what your last point concerning first interview screenings being done with AI. And I think there's a lot of mixed response regarding that because recently when I was researching that some respondents, as in job seekers, are saying, I think it was a survey that's done, was saying they felt like it was unnatural and a bit uncomfortable for them to do first interviews using, AI, not a human on the other side. Other people found it was quite an enjoyable experience. I've personally been interviewed by a robot for myself. Initially, it was unnerving, but I actually felt a bit more comfortable doing it than I would probably with a human. You know what I mean? So I think there's mixed responses. How would you address that?
Yeah, there's absolutely reticence. There's mixed responses. We've done a lot of work on this question. We've surveyed thousands of job seekers about their attitudes on AI-led interviews, and of course, we look at the responses to our own products when candidates take them. And what we found is a few things. Number one, a lot of the reticence comes from candidates saying, well, I'd rather talk to a person. And the fact that you're making me talk to AI instead of giving me the chance to talk to a person somehow tells me that this company doesn't care about people. It's like, you're just dehumanizing me and seeing me as a machine. And what I would say to those people is when you look at the data, that's exactly the opposite of the case, that by far, most applications to most jobs never get looked at by anyone and never result in an interview. Something like 97% of job applications just go into the bin, and that number is getting higher as application volume going up and up. And so the choice you have is not, do I want to talk to a person or do I want to talk to an AI? The choice you actually have is, do you want your resume just to go into a black hole, never to be seen by anyone? Or do you want to be given the opportunity to interview for the role, be asked the same questions as everyone else, and demonstrate what you're capable of to give yourself a fair shot? And so I think when people understand that, they're a little bit more open to the situation. And then the second thing people care about most, which was echoed in kind of your question, is it feels kind of clunky. It feels robotic. I don't like it. And I think that was very true of the first generation of these products. So like right when ChatGPT took the world by storm in 2002 or 2022, you can look at that sort of early wave of technologies. People are really enthusiastic about it, but if you just take ChatGPT and aim it at a candidate, it's going to feel clunky. It's going to not, do a good job at not interrupting you. It's not going to understand when you've actually answered the question versus if there's a good follow-up. It's not going to do really good job at answering quickly. It's going to sort of bleep, 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 bleep between each, feel very tinny. And also some of the early products just weren't designed with job seekers in mind. Think back to the beginning of this conversation. A lot of these software historically was built just for the employer. And so it didn't care really, it didn't really think about who is that job seeker on their side, what do they need? And surprisingly, shockingly, I would say, what we found was the early generation of AI tools from a couple of years ago didn't even often tell the job seeker ahead of time that they were going to talk to an AI. They just said, we'd like you to interview. You'd show up on the Zoom only to realize it's not a person at all. It's an AI. So yeah, they were bad. And what I would say is, if you haven't looked at the new technologies, if you haven't looked at what we have on offer now, update your, give it another shot, because these things now are very comfortable. You can interrupt them, you can interview it, you can ask your own questions about the job. You can take your time to think of your answers. It's going to feel very naturalistic. You can opt out if you're not comfortable with it, and go back to the traditional process. So there's a lot of new technology out there that overcomes those. But I get the reticence. These things are new, and I think the technologies are evolving so fast. It's almost like none of us asked for this to happen, right? And all of a sudden, AI is kind of everywhere in our lives, and figuring that out and coming to grips with it is not always comfortable. I totally get that.
Yeah, I think this is the fastest wave of disruption we've seen, since, every few years you'll get a big technology that takes the world by storm. When the internet came out, it was a few years and that became a thing, the World Wide Web. But this one seems a whole lot faster than even the introduction and the evolution of the internet. I want to go back to your other point. You made a really good point about bias in hiring, and I want to touch on that a bit more. You believe that AI can improve hiring, as you mentioned, you demonstrated if it's implemented well, like for example with first-time interviews. But who is accountable when it gets it wrong? So, for example, if you have a talented person who is systematically overlooked, like you mentioned, someone with a traditionally African American name,
Yes.
And they get systematically overlooked because of an AI-driven hiring process. The algorithm detects, their name doesn't quite match what they're looking for. Who's accountable for that? Is the CEO of the employer, the hiring company accountable? Is the HR team accountable? Is the software vendor behind that ATS accountable? Who maintains that? Who owns that failure?
Yeah, look, I think that everyone involved in that supply chain is ultimately accountable for how it's going in that process, and is responsible and accountable for how it works. So again, this is not new. Discrimination in hiring has been happening as long as there's been hiring.
Yeah.
And it's always the case that the employer is on the hook for the decisions that they're making. I think that's still the case. Now there's an additional place to turn, which is if that company in turn is using a technology that's playing a role in how these decisions play out, that then vendor, that company also has some accountability and some responsibility for how those decisions work. And so I think what can we do about that? I think what's really important is for everyone involved to be as transparent as possible. I don't think it's fair or reasonable for a vendor like us or an employer to just say, trust us, take my word for it. We're good people. Like that's not right. I mean, I think, history has shown us that, that's not good enough. And so we got to bring the receipts. So for us as a vendor, I know that we publish third-party audits every month where our software is run through by a trusted third-party independent firm, and we publish those audits on the internet. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can see for yourself. And we use that extensively in guiding what we build, how we build, and what we provide to our users. And so I think companies should have a high degree of transparency and accountability here. And look, I think the nuance would be, I would say maybe this way. The bar for being better than how hiring has always worked is pretty low, right? Hiring, after all, I mean, I've made a career on the very obvious idea that there's a lot of problems in hiring that can be fixed, and this is one of them. And so I don't think anybody's looking at how hiring used to be and saying, well, that was perfect, let's go back to that.
Yeah.
So I think we can make things much better. I think we can make things fairer. I think we can make things more transparent. I think we get more accountability. I don't think we can make things perfect. I think employers are going to make mistakes. I think software is going to make mistakes. And when those things do happen, having the ability to trace it through, analyze it, diagnose it, and update the system to account for that is I think important and not to be overlooked.
So take me behind the scenes. I think it's good that you have that monthly report that comes out, but take me behind the scenes. Let's say I'm a vendor, or let's say I'm a job candidate and I'm applying for a job and I see that the portal says greenhouse. So I know, okay, I'm going through there to apply for this role. What assurance do I have, other than the report, what assurance do I have to know that I as an African American, will not be discriminated against because of my name or because of the neighborhood that I've come from, or even my education? I went to an HBCU. How do you train, obviously not, don't reveal proprietary data, but how do you train your systems to be as fair as possible? Because traditionally, when we think about AI and even ATS, it's trained on data, which that data in itself can often be inherently biased. So how do you train your system, your ATS system at Greenhouse, to ensure that it's not repeating the mistakes of the next ATS provider?
Yeah, that's a great question, and they call that the Jared problem. If you ever heard that,
Mm.
there's this kind of classic story where they trained recruiting software on who are the successful candidates that we found in the past, and let's go find more of them. And the
Yeah.
AI did what it does, and it found that people named Jared were more likely to get hired, and so it went and found all the Jareds and then like hired them. It's like, yeah,
Wow.
that's exactly the problem you should worry about. And so when I said earlier that I think AI, if designed properly, can make things radically better, much more fair, if we stop and rethink how hiring works, it's exactly the kind of thing I have in mind. So in the earlier example that I told, your name doesn't even factor in. Like, nobody knows what college you went to. That's not even part of the process. It's just show up at the interview, answer the questions in the same order that everyone else got asked the same questions, and based on your answers, we're gonna pass through the people with the strongest answers. And so I think that's a way in which it's not just about sort of how do we mitigate the potential harm of AI, where the best possible outcome is like a little bit of harm. Instead, it's how do we actually reimagine the process altogether so that those things aren't even possible. So resume review isn't even a thing,
Right.
right? And so that 50 percentage point disparity at the very start of the process just is defined completely out of existence. And I think
Mhm.
that's where the power and the potential of AI comes in. And so look, I think until we get to that full vision, absolutely we need to design rigorously with that, with those downsides in mind. We need to expose ourselves to third party validation and scrutiny, and we do those things. But I think the real opportunity that we're pursuing is not just how do we reduce the amount of harm that we're causing, but how do we actually proactively make things much, much better? And I just think there's so many opportunities if you think about it through that lens. I mean, think about in the rest of what's going on, outside the little world of hiring and like recruiting where we're in, and just think about the world at large. Like, how much creativity and expression is being enabled by AI? And I mean, it's not just about making everything more efficient, and it's also about creativity and expression, and people are making music and art. Um, and so I think you can allow for both. I think you can say, let's make sure that the algorithms that we do have in place are based on sound, structured hiring principles, are open to third party scrutiny, and what can I do to let you as a person get beyond what's on your resume and showcase what you're really capable of? How do I make sure that the process is faster and more transparent and fairer? Um, and God, I just see opportunities everywhere I look. I mean, one complaint that candidates have had for ages, the number one issue is that they never hear back after they apply or after they interview.
Yeah.
And partly, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that is, but partly it's like, well, it takes time to write them an email and like,
Yeah.
but we can automate that now. And so you think about all these problems of like of historically how hiring has worked. Hiring's been pretty bad. And so that should also tell us there's so many opportunities to make it better with AI. And like, in a future world where people had that level of transparency, everybody heard back, they had a chance to express what they're capable of and to compete on their own merits and skills instead of what college they went to or what names on top of their resume. I think that's a world that's much better, that's much more fair, and where people stop feeling like hiring is a thing I have to beat, and
Yeah.
start feeling again like it's a system that's there to work for me, that's there to help me get a job. That's what we're trying to do.
So as we're progressing towards that utopian future, and I love that idea where that's completely eliminated and we're focusing on, like you mentioned with the first interview example, as we're progressing towards that. So I'm assuming Greenhouse, you guys are developing that technology so that those AI powered first time interviews can happen. While you're developing that, obviously there are still employers who are using your systems for traditional ATS. That traditional system, has that also been updated to reflect to ensure that biases are not present?
Well, again, I don't think we can ever ensure 100% that bias is not present. That's
Right.
not really, perfection is not possible. I think what we can do is, how do we design the system so that those biases are mitigated, that we're aware of them, and that we can do things to counter them, and to help compensate for them. And we've always done that. So you can go back 10 years, and Greenhouse released a set of features for candidates to record their name pronunciation, let's say, to share their pronouns, for companies to collect demographic data about their job applicants and analyze how those are playing out through the hiring funnel from interview stages and ultimately to offers and hires in ways that are compliant with the law, in ways that are properly transparent, but also that don't connect back to any one individual candidate. And so we've been invested in that process for many, many years, and I think we'll continue to do that. So, we've had, I'm proud to say, a strong positive impact on fairness in hiring for the 15 years that we've been in business. And that's always going to be central to how we operate. But it's going to be it's a tall hill to climb, and I don't want anyone to think I'm up here saying your problems are imaginary, or you're to blame. Like, it's tough to get a job right now. There's a
Yeah.
lot of problems, in how the system is designed, and I wake up every day thinking about how we can make it better.
Amazing. I think my final question for you would be, um, you know, let's fast forward, let's say 5 years. You have, because we know hiring is changing and AI is changing so quickly. 5 years from now, you have a 22-year-old graduate who it graduates from university, they're about to start their career, okay, making a debut into the world of work. What do you think is the hardest truth that they're going to have to accept that universities, colleges, and employers are not admitting or telling young people today?
Well, you're assuming in 5 years from now that most workers are coming from university, which I think is also, very subject to a lot of change right now and a lot of disruption. But look, I think, you know, everybody's wondering what's going to happen with AI in the workforce and how's it going to affect young people. And for every person, there's 10 ideas. Here's what I know is, if you go back 100 years, kind of the sort of technical skill that you had defined who you were. You were a shoemaker or a hat maker, or
Yeah.
that, and you had that knowledge, and could do that thing, and that was kind of you. And I think the further we've gone into the information age, and the technology economy, the less and less that those like specific technical skills have been the definition of you, and the more the sort of durable skills, what people used to call soft skills, um, of your capabilities, your intelligence, your ability to adapt to change, and your ability to learn new things, your ability to work hard and have grit. Like, that's what really matters in today's workforce, because basically nobody in the workforce was hired to be good at the set of tools of AI tools that are dominating the work landscape now. So it's nobody trained to be a Claude engineer 5 years ago, because it didn't exist. And
Yeah.
so over the next 5 years, the pace of technology change and disruption is only going to increase and accelerate. And so focusing less on, I know this one particular thing, and more grit, determination, willingness to learn, agility, those
Mm.
basic durable skills that anybody can bring, that's open to anyone, no matter what your name is, no matter where you went to college or if you went to college. Those are, I think, the things that are really mattering in the workforce.
Daniel, thank you so much for your time. It has been a fantastic discussion, and I'm sure answered a lot of job seekers' questions as well as hiring leaders' questions as well. For those of you who are listening or watching this podcast episode, definitely share this with your coworkers or with your family, people who you think would really benefit from this. If you have any fresh graduates from the class of 2026 in your family as well, this is definitely something they should be paying attention to. Like this episode, comment, and also rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And I will see you in next week, Monday's episode of Work 2.0, the podcast.